He wore a bespoke Brioni suit and a sneer that cost him his humanity. Archer Valerius thought the world was his playground, and everyone in it was merely a prop for his amusement. When he looked at the tired waitress in the stained apron, he didn't see a person. He saw a target. He leaned over to his Saudi business partners and whispered a cruel, degrading joke in Arabic, assuming her ignorance was as guaranteed as his bank account. But Archer made a fatal calculation. He forgot that silence doesn't mean stupidity. When she finally opened her mouth, she didn't just serve him dinner. She served him his worst nightmare. The air inside L'Obsidienne always smelled of truffle oil, old money, and quiet desperation. It was the kind of New York establishment where a salad cost more than a monthly utility bill, and the lighting was kept dim to hide the sins of the clientele. Samantha adjusted her apron, feeling the familiar ache in her lower back. It was a double shift, her third of the week. At 26, she had the resume of a corporate shark, but the bank account of a college student, thanks to a medical debt that had swallowed her family whole 3 years ago. Now, she wasn't Samantha the valedictorian, or Samantha the polyglot. She was just, excuse me, or miss, or simply a pair of hands holding a tray. Table 4 needs a refresh on the sparkling water. And don't look them in the eye, Samantha. It's the Valerius party. The floor manager, Mr. Henderson, hissed as he passed her. He was a nervous man who sweated profusely whenever a credit card turned black. Samantha froze. Valerius. She glanced toward the corner booth, the one upholstered in crushed velvet and shielded by a row of imported palms. Archer Valerius. The tech mogul, the man whose face was plastered on Forbes and Time, usually accompanied by headlines about hostile takeovers and ruthless efficiency. He was currently laughing, a sharp, barking sound that cut through the ambient jazz. He was flanked by 3 men. Samantha recognized the cut of their thobes and the heavy gold watches on their wrists. They were investors from the Gulf, likely here to close the deal on Archer's new artificial intelligence infrastructure in Dubai. "I'm on it," Samantha said, keeping her voice flat. She grabbed a fresh bottle of San Pellegrino and a linen napkin. She approached the table with the practiced invisibility of a servant. Archer was leaning back, one arm draped over the booth, a glass of amber whiskey in his hand. He was undeniably handsome in a predatory way, sharp jawline, eyes the color of cold steel, and dark hair swept back with precision. But his energy was toxic. It radiated a belief that he was the sun, and everyone else was just dust, caught in his gravity. "Gentlemen, the infrastructure is sound," Archer was saying in English, his voice smooth. "The Americans are bogged down in regulations, but with your capital and my tech, we bypass the red tape. We build the future while they're still debating the ethics of the past." One of the investors, a heavy-set man named Omar, looked skeptical. "It is a lot of risk, Mr. Valerius. The projections are conservative," Archer interrupted, dismissing the concern with a wave of his hand. Samantha stepped into the gap in the conversation to pour the water. She moved efficiently, her eyes trained on the glass. Archer stopped talking. He looked at her, then at his empty glass, then back at her. He didn't move his hand to make it easier for her. He left it right where it was, forcing her to lean awkwardly across the table to avoid spilling. "Careful," Archer snapped, though she hadn't spilled a drop. "This suit costs more than your entire life's earnings." Samantha pulled back, the bottle dripping with condensation. "Apologies, sir." Archer rolled his eyes and turned to Omar, switching effortlessly into Arabic. He assumed the language was a private channel, a firewall that the help couldn't breach. "Look at this," Archer said in Arabic, gesturing vaguely at Samantha with his glass. Typical American service. Clumsy, slow, and dead behind the eyes. I bet she thinks this water is fancy because it has bubbles." The men at the table chuckled, though Omar looked a bit uncomfortable. Archer wasn't done. The whiskey had loosened his tongue, and his arrogance needed a target. He continued in Arabic, his tone dripping with mockery. "I wonder if she can even read the bill. Probably goes home to a trailer park and watches reality TV, dreaming of a man like me saving her. Pathetic. These people are sheep, Omar. That is why we are the wolves." Samantha stood perfectly still. Her hand, gripping the cold glass bottle, tightened until her knuckles turned white. She knew Archer Valerius, not just from the magazines. She knew him because 3 years ago, before her father's heart attack and the bankruptcy, she had been a junior analyst at a rival firm. She had studied his business model, she had studied his language patterns, and she had spent 4 years of her childhood in Riyadh while her father worked as a diplomat, followed by a degree in linguistics from Yale that she currently kept hidden under a stained apron. Archer looked up at her, switching back to English, a smirk playing on his lips. "What are you waiting for? A tip? Go get me more ice. Now." The table went silent. The investors watched, expecting the waitress to scurry away, humiliated and confused by the foreign words she presumably hadn't understood, only sensing the tone. Samantha didn't move. She took a slow breath, inhaling the scent of their expensive colognes and the stench of Archer's hubris. She looked Archer dead in the eye. The submissive slant of her shoulders vanished. Her spine straightened, transforming her from a waitress into a queen in exile. "Actually, Mr. Valerius," Samantha began, her voice clear and carrying through the hushed section of the restaurant. She switched to flawless, high dialect Arabic, the kind spoken by poets and kings. "The sheep you speak of are often the ones who keep the wolves from starving," she said in Arabic, her pronunciation impeccable. "And as for reading the bill, I suggest you read your own contract with the Al Fayed Group more carefully. Clause 14, subsection B. They are using your infrastructure to launder liabilities, not to build the future. If you sign that deal tonight, the wolf will be the one in the trap." The silence that followed was louder than a gunshot. For 5 seconds, the only sound in the VIP corner of L'Obsidienne was the soft clinking of ice melting in Archer Valerius's glass. Omar, the lead investor, dropped his fork. It hit the porcelain plate with a sharp clatter that made Archer flinch. The other 2 men stared at Samantha with mouths slightly agape, their eyes wide with shock. Archer's face went through a complex transformation. First, confusion. Then, the realization hit him like a physical blow. The smirk slid off his face, replaced by a pale, hollow look of disbelief. The arrogance that usually acted as his armor had been pierced by a waitress in a $10 uniform. "What?" Archer stammered in English, his composure shattering. "What did you just say?" Samantha didn't retreat. She didn't apologize. She placed the water bottle gently on the table. "I said," she continued, switching back to English but keeping her gaze icy, "that you should check your zipper, figuratively speaking. Your arrogance is showing, and it's unsightly." She turned to Omar, switching back to Arabic, her tone respectful but authoritative. "Sir, forgive the intrusion, but hospitality is sacred in your culture, as it is in mine. To mock the one who serves you is to mock the food itself. A man who has no respect for the hands that feed him has no honor in business." Omar slowly stood up. He was a large man, imposing and serious. He looked at Archer, then at Samantha. A slow nod of respect accompanied his gaze toward her. "She speaks the truth, Valerius," Omar said, his English heavily accented but grave. "And her accent, it is from Riyadh, pure, educated." He turned his dark eyes onto Archer. You mocked her as a peasant, yet she speaks with more grace than you. Archer scrambled to salvage the situation. He stood up, knocking his chair back. His face was flushing a deep, angry crimson. This is a setup, Archer hissed, pointing a finger at Samantha. Who sent you? Is it Kincaid? Is it the board? You're a spy. I'm a waitress, Mr. Valerius, Samantha said calmly. I take orders. I bring food. And occasionally, I listen to men who think they are gods, explain how they plan to lose millions, because they are too busy looking in the mirror to read the fine print. Archer looked like he was about to explode. He turned around, scanning the room frantically, until he spotted Mr. Henderson cowering near the wine rack. Manager! Archer roared. Get over here, now! The entire restaurant had stopped eating. Heads were turned, phones were discreetly raised, camera lenses flashing in the dim light. This was the kind of drama New York thrived on. Mr. Henderson ran over, wringing his hands, looking like a man marching to the gallows. Mr. Valerius, sir, I am so sorry, I don't know what. Fire her, Archer demanded, his voice shaking with rage. I want her gone, now, and I'm buying this place. I'm buying this damn restaurant just so I can ensure she never works in this city again. He turned back to Samantha, his eyes narrowing into slits. You think you're clever? You're nobody. I will crush you. I will find out who you are. And I will bury you under so many lawsuits your grandchildren will be born bankrupt. Samantha finally smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had nothing left to lose. You can fire me, Archer, she said, using his first name with deliberate informality. But you can't unhear what I told you. Clause 14. Subsection B. The Al-Fayed Group isn't building a tech hub. They're building a data farm to offload toxic assets from their failed venture in Singapore. If you sign, the SEC will be at your door in 6 months. And I know you can't afford that. Not with the investigation into your shell companies in the Cayman Islands already pending. Archer froze. The blood drained from his face completely. That was information that wasn't public. That was information that only 3 people in the world were supposed to know, Archer, his CFO, and his lawyer. How? He whispered, his voice barely audible. How do you know that? Samantha untied her apron. She pulled it over her head, dropping it onto the expensive table right next to his whiskey. I read Mr. Valerius, she said, and unlike you, I pay attention. She turned to Omar. Maya as-Salama, she said softly. Wait, Omar commanded. The investor reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. It was thick, black cardstock with gold embossing. He extended it to Samantha. If this man is foolish enough to fire you, Omar said, glaring at Archer, then he is too foolish for my money. Call this number. My firm has need of people who understand both language and honor. Archer watched, paralyzed, as his billion-dollar deal literally handed a job offer to the waitress he had just insulted. Samantha took the card. Thank you. She turned on her heel and walked away. She walked past a trembling Mr. Henderson, past the stunned diners, and out the front door of L'Obsidienne. The cool night air hit her face, and for the first time in 3 years, Samantha didn't feel tired. Her heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She had just declared war on one of the most powerful men in New York. She had just burned her bridge to her only source of income. But as she walked down the block, her phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number. Who are you? And how much do you want for your silence? AV. Samantha stopped under a street lamp. She looked at the text. Archer Valerius was scared. She typed back, I don't want your money. I want an apology, a public one. She hit send. Moments later, A black SUV with tinted windows screeched to a halt at the curb beside her. The back window rolled down. It wasn't Archer. It was a woman with severe glasses and a headset. "Get in," she said. "Mr. Valerius insists on driving you home. We need to talk." Samantha looked at the car. She looked at the street. She knew she shouldn't get in, but the adrenaline was still singing in her blood. And more importantly, she knew Archer Valerius wouldn't kill her, not when she held the key to his survival. She opened the door and slid into the leather interior. Archer was sitting on the other side, looking like he had just gone 12 rounds with a boxer. He poured a drink from the car's minibar, his hand shaking slightly. "Who are you really?" he asked, not looking at her. "Waitresses don't know about the Cayman investigation." "My name is Samantha Jenkins," she said. Archer frowned. Jenkins. He swirled his drink. Then his eyes widened. "Robert Jenkins, the CFO of Oakhaven Logistics." "My father," Samantha said, her voice dropping an octave. "The man you framed for embezzlement 3 years ago to cover your own tracks during the merger. The man who died of a heart attack 2 weeks after you destroyed his reputation." Archer dropped his glass. It didn't break on the plush carpet, but whiskey soaked into the expensive rug. "You," he breathed. "Me," Samantha confirmed. "And tonight wasn't a coincidence, Archer. I knew you'd be at L'Obsidienne. I knew you'd be drunk. And I knew you couldn't resist showing off. I've been waiting for this moment for 1,000 days. The car sped off into the New York night, carrying a billionaire and his nemesis, bound together by a secret that could destroy them both. The interior of the Maybach was quieter than a tomb. The city lights of Manhattan streaked by outside the tinted windows, blurring into lines of neon fire. But inside, the air was cold and stagnant. Archer poured himself another drink. His hand was steadier now, the initial shock having been replaced by a cold, calculating survival instinct. He didn't look at Samantha. He looked at the amber liquid in his crystal glass, swirling it rhythmically. "Robert Jenkins," Archer said, testing the name as if it were a foreign coin. He was a good accountant, meticulous, a bit too rigid for the modern world, perhaps. "He was an honest man," Samantha corrected, her voice cutting through the hum of the engine. "And you used that honesty against him. You knew he wouldn't sign off on the discrepancies in the Oakhaven merger. So you planted the funds in his personal account. You tipped off the auditors. You watched him get handcuffed in front of his neighbors." Archer took a sip. "It was a chess move, Samantha. In business, pawns get sacrificed. It's nothing personal." "He died," Samantha said. "The stress caused a massive coronary event 2 weeks before his trial. My mother followed him 6 months later. Broken heart, they called it. But it was poverty and shame. You killed them both." The car slowed, turning into the private underground entrance of the nebulous Valerius Tower, a glass needle piercing the sky near Central Park. "We're going up," Archer said, finally looking at her. "We can't discuss this in a car." "I'm not going to your penthouse," Samantha said, reaching for the door handle. "You are," Archer replied calmly, "because if you walk out that door now, I will have the police pick you up for corporate espionage before you reach the corner. You admitted you have knowledge of the Cayman accounts? That's classified company data. Possession of stolen trade secrets is a felony." Samantha hesitated. She knew the law. She also knew that Archer had the best lawyers money could buy, sharks who could turn a victim into a criminal with a single filing. She released the handle. They rode the private elevator in silence. The numbers ticked up. 40, 60, 80. Penthouse. The doors opened into a sprawling living space that looked more like a museum than a home. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city Archer thought he owned. Modern art, abstract, aggressive, and expensive, lined the walls. It was cold, sterile, and imposing. Archer walked to a hidden wall safe behind a painting. He punched in a code, the beeps echoing in the vast room. He didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out a checkbook. He walked over to a marble island in the kitchen area, uncapped a fountain pen, and scribbled quickly. He tore the check out and slid it across the marble toward Samantha. $5 million, Archer said. Samantha looked at the check. It was more money than she could imagine. It was freedom. It was her student loans paid, her medical debts erased, a house, a life. "This is a settlement," Archer said, his voice regaining its smooth, salesman cadence. "For your father. A retroactive severance package. In exchange, you sign a non-disclosure agreement. You forget about the Cayman accounts. You forget about the Al-Fayed deal. You forget tonight ever happened. You take this, you move to, I don't know, Paris, and you live like a queen." Samantha stared at the check. The paper trembled slightly because her hands were shaking, not from greed, but from rage. "You think this fixes it?" she whispered. "I think money fixes everything," Archer said, leaning against the counter. "It's the only thing that's real, Samantha. Justice? Honor? Those are fairy tales poor people tell themselves to feel better about being poor. Take the money. Win the game." Samantha picked up the check. Archer smirked, a flash of triumph in his eyes. He thought he had her. "Everyone has a price." Samantha slowly tore the check down the middle. The sound of the ripping paper was satisfyingly loud. She put the two halves together and tore them again. And again, until $5 million was nothing but confetti on the cold marble floor. Archer's smirk vanished. His jaw tightened. "I don't want your money, Archer," Samantha said, her voice steady now. "I want your name. I want you to stand in a courtroom and admit what you did to my father. I want you to lose everything, just like we did." Archer slammed his hand on the counter. "You are insane. Do you know who I am? I can bury you. I control the narrative. By tomorrow morning, the press will be running stories about how you're a deranged stalker who harassed me at dinner. I will ruin you." "You already ruined me," Samantha said, stepping closer to him, invading his space. "I'm a waitress with a linguistics degree and a mountain of debt. I have nothing left to lose. But you? You have everything to lose. The Al-Fayed deal, the SEC investigation, your reputation." She pulled her phone out. "And by the way, this conversation, it's been streaming live to a private cloud server since I got in the car." It was a bluff. Samantha hadn't started recording until they entered the elevator. But Archer didn't know that. Archer lunged for the phone, but Samantha took a quick step back. "Touch me," she warned, "and the assault charge gets added to the list." Archer froze. He was breathing hard, his face a mask of fury and fear. For the first time in his life, the checkbook hadn't worked. The intimidation hadn't worked. He was looking at a variable he couldn't control. "Get out," he hissed. "Get out of my house." "Gladly," Samantha said. She turned to the elevator. "Oh, and Archer, check clause 14, subsection B. I wasn't lying." She hit the button. As the doors closed, she saw Archer Valerius standing alone in his multi-million-dollar cage, surrounded by the confetti of his own money, looking smaller than she had ever seen him. The adrenaline crash hit Samantha the moment she stepped out of the Valerius Tower and onto the sidewalk. Her knees buckled, and she had to lean against a cold brick wall to keep from collapsing. She hailed a cab, an expense she couldn't afford, but she didn't feel safe on the subway. Not tonight. Her apartment was in Queens, a fourth-floor walk-up with leaky pipes and thin walls. It was a far cry from the life she had grown up in, but it was hers. She locked the door, engaging all 3 deadbolts. She didn't sleep. She sat at her small, wobbly desk, her laptop screen glowing in the dark. She searched for Archer Valerius restaurant incident. It was already starting. A gossip blog had posted a grainy video taken by a diner. It showed Samantha speaking Arabic, but the caption read, "Deranged waitress screams at tech mogul at L'Obsidian." The comments were brutal. "She looks unhinged." Probably on drugs. Waiters these days have no respect. Archer's PR machine was fast. They were painting her as the villain before she even had a chance to speak. They were discrediting the witness. It was a classic strategy. If the messenger is crazy, the message must be a lie. Samantha's phone buzzed. It was a notification from LinkedIn. Someone had viewed her profile. Omar Al-Hassan. She remembered the card, the heavy black cardstock she had shoved into her pocket. She pulled it out. There was a direct number. It was 3 a.m., but in Dubai it was nearly noon, and Omar was likely still in New York, probably unable to sleep after the disaster dinner. She took a breath and dialed. It rang twice. "This is Al-Hassan," a deep voice answered. "Mr. Al-Hassan," Samantha said, her voice firm. "This is the waitress, Samantha Jenkins." There was a pause. "Miss Jenkins, I expected you might call, though perhaps not this late." "I don't think time is on my side, sir," Samantha said. "Archer is already spinning the story." "I have seen the blogs," Omar said. "He is a man who fights dirty. It is why I hesitated to do business with him. A man without honor in life is a man without stability in finance." "I need to meet you," Samantha said. "Not for a job. I have documents from my father, Robert Jenkins." "The accountant?" Omar asked sharply. "I remember that scandal. It was Oakhaven Logistics, yes?" "Yes. Archer framed him to cover up the liquidity issues he had before the IPO. My father kept copies of the real ledgers. Hard copies. Hidden." This was the ace up her sleeve. The ledger she had mentioned to Archer was real, but she hadn't touched it in 3 years. It was in a safety deposit box in New Jersey, the key buried in her jewelry box. "If you have proof that Valerius falsified his assets prior to an IPO," Omar said slowly, "then the Al-Fayed group cannot touch him. It would be toxic. We would be complicit in fraud." "I can bring you the ledgers," Samantha said, "but I need protection. He knows who I am now. He knows I'm Robert's daughter." "Meet me tomorrow," Omar said. "Do not go to your job. Do not stay at your apartment. Do you have somewhere safe?" Samantha looked around her tiny room. "No." "Go to the St. Regis Hotel," Omar instructed. "I have a suite there. I will leave my name at the front desk. Ask for the Falcon Protocol. It is a security arrangement I use for my family. You will be safe there until we meet at noon." "Thank you," Samantha whispered. "Do not thank me yet, Miss Jenkins," Omar said darkly. "You are poking a sleeping dragon. We must make sure we have a sword before he breathes fire." Samantha hung up. She grabbed a backpack and started stuffing it with essentials. Laptop, hard drive, a change of clothes, the key to the safety deposit box. She was just zipping the bag when she heard it. Heavy footsteps in the hallway outside her door. Not the stumbling steps of her neighbor, Mr. Henderson, no relation to the restaurant manager, who usually came home drunk at 2 a.m. These were deliberate, heavy boots. They stopped right outside her door. Samantha froze. She looked at the peephole. It had been painted over by the previous tenant. A piece of paper slid under her door. Samantha approached it cautiously. She picked it up. It wasn't a threat. It was an eviction notice. Notice to vacate. Immediate effect. Reason: breach of lease, noise complaints, illegal activity. It was dated for today. It was forged, obviously. But below it was a second paper, a printout of a police record. Samantha Jenkins, arrest warrant issued, charges, grand larceny and extortion. Archer wasn't just using the press, he had bought the police. Or at least, he had friends in high places who could file paperwork fast. If she stayed here, the cops would be knocking in an hour. She grabbed her bag and ran to the window. It was the 4th floor, but there was a rusted fire escape. She climbed out into the cold night air, the metal grating icy under her hands. As she descended, she heard the heavy thud of a battering ram hitting her apartment door upstairs. They hadn't come to evict her. They had come to silence her. Samantha hit the alleyway running. She kept to the shadows, avoiding the streetlights. She felt like a spy in a movie, but the cold air burning her lungs was all too real. She couldn't go to the St. Regis. Not yet. If the police were looking for her, hotels would be watching for her ID. Archer had checkmated her safe harbor. She needed to get to New Jersey. She needed the ledgers. She pulled her hood up and ducked into a 24-hour internet cafe on the corner. She needed a new plan, and she needed help. She logged onto a public terminal and hesitated. Who could she trust? Her father's old friends had abandoned them. Her college friends were living different lives. Then she remembered a name. Not a friend, exactly. A rival. Preston Cole. He was a forensic accountant who had worked with her father. He was young, brilliant, and hated Robert Jenkins because Robert was too slow. But Preston hated corruption even more. He was now working for the SEC as an external consultant. Samantha found his email. She typed quickly. Subject: The ghost of Oakhaven body. I have the uncooked books. The real ones. Valerius is trying to kill the messenger. If you want the biggest takedown of your career, meet me at the Hoboken terminal, by the clock tower. 6 a.m. Come alone. S.J. She hit send. It was 4:15 a.m. She had less than 2 hours to cross the city, evade a billionaire's private security, avoid the police, and make it to New Jersey to retrieve the only thing that could save her life. Samantha Jenkins, the waitress who just wanted to pay her bills, vanished into the subway system. The hunt was on. The Hoboken terminal at 5:45 a.m. was a cavern of echoing footsteps and the smell of stale coffee and diesel fumes. Commuters, heads down and eyes glazed, shuffled toward the path trains like sleepwalkers. Samantha moved against the current, her hood pulled low. She had ditched her phone in a trash can 3 blocks away. It felt like cutting off a limb, but she knew how Archer Valerius operated. His security team, Aegis Solutions, recruited from ex-intelligence agencies. They could triangulate a signal within minutes. Now, she was a ghost in the analog world. She stood near the clock tower, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Every police officer she saw made her flinch. Every black SUV looked like a hearse. At 5:58 a.m., a man approached. He didn't look like a savior. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a decade. Preston Cole wore a trench coat that had seen better days and wire-rimmed glasses that magnified his bloodshot eyes. He held a folded newspaper under one arm, an old-school spy cliché that almost made Samantha smile if she wasn't terrified. "You look like hell, Samantha," Preston said, not stopping as he walked past her. "Follow me. Don't look back." She followed him out of the terminal and down a side street toward a 24-hour diner that looked like it violated several health codes. They slid into a back booth. "Order coffee," Preston muttered. "Make it look natural." Samantha ordered 2 black coffees. When the waitress left, Preston leaned in. "I ran a check on the warrant you mentioned," he said, his voice a low rumble. "It's real, but it's flagged internal hold. That means the police aren't actively hunting you yet. Archer is holding it over your head. He wants you to come to him, before he releases the hounds. It's leverage. "He came to my apartment," Samantha whispered, "with a battering ram." "Scare tactics," Preston said, stirring sugar into his coffee aggressively. "If he wanted you dead, you'd be dead. He needs what you have." "Where is the ledger?" "Safe deposit box, First National on Washington Street. It opens in 30 minutes. Preston nodded. "Your father, Robert. He was a stubborn old mule, but he was the best forensic accountant I ever knew. If he hid something, he hid it well." "But why now, Samantha? Why did you wait 3 years?" "I didn't have the key," Samantha lied. She couldn't tell him she had been too broken, too afraid to fight. "And I didn't have an opening. Last night, Archer got sloppy. He bragged about the Al-Fayed deal in front of me. He exposed his flank." "The Al-Fayed deal?" Preston whistled low. "That's a $4 billion house of cards. If Archer is cooking the books for that, he's not just risking jail. He's risking being erased by the Saudis. They don't sue people who lose their money, Samantha. They make them disappear." "I know," Samantha said. "That's why I need the ledger. It proves a pattern of behavior. It proves he did it before." They finished their coffee in silence. At 8:55 a.m., they walked to the bank. It was an old building, built when banks were designed to look like temples. The marble lobby was cool and quiet. Samantha signed in using her passport, the only ID she had left. The teller, a sweet elderly woman named Mrs. Gable, didn't blink. She led them to the vault. The heavy steel door swung open. Samantha's hands trembled as she inserted the key into box 404. Inside there was no money, just a thick, leather-bound notebook and a heavy, encrypted hard drive. Samantha opened the notebook. It was her father's handwriting. Frantic, jagged, columns of numbers, dates, and in the margins notes, AV, diverting funds to Shell Corp, Orion. Orion linked to unauthorized tech exports. Preston looked over her shoulder, his eyes widening. "This isn't just embezzlement," he murmured. "Look at the recipients. These aren't just shell companies. These are embargoed entities. Samantha, Archer wasn't just stealing money. He was selling restricted AI chips to foreign militaries under the table." Samantha felt the blood drain from her face. "Treason?" "High treason," Preston confirmed. "This isn't an SEC case anymore. This is FBI, NSA. Suddenly, the bank's silent alarm light on the wall flickered red. No sound, just a terrifying, pulsing crimson. "They found us!" Preston hissed. "They tracked your passport usage. The system is rigged." "How?" Samantha gasped, shoving the ledger and drive into her backpack. "Archer owns shares in the banking software conglomerate," Preston said, grabbing her arm. "He has a backdoor notification for your name. We have maybe 60 seconds before private security or the cops swarm this place." They ran out of the vault. Mrs. Gable looked up, confused. "Is everything all right, dear?" "Fire drill!" Preston shouted, pushing Samantha toward the emergency exit in the back. They burst into the alleyway, just as tires screeched out front. 2 black SUVs blocked the main entrance. Men in tactical gear, no police badges, just plain grey uniforms, jumped out. "Aegis," Samantha breathed. "Run," Preston commanded. They sprinted down the alley. Preston, despite his disheveled appearance, was fast. He led her through a maze of dumpsters and fences. They could hear shouting behind them. "We need a car," Preston panted. "We can't steal one," Samantha cried. "I'm not stealing," Preston said, pulling a set of keys from his pocket. "I parked my beat-up Honda 3 blocks away. It's off the grid. No GPS." They reached the car, a rusted grey sedan that looked like it belonged in a junkyard. They dove inside, just as a grey-clad figure rounded the corner, raising a radio to his lips. Preston gunned the engine. The car sputtered, then roared to life. He peeled away from the curb, narrowly missing a garbage truck. "Where are we going?" Samantha asked, clutching her backpack to her chest. "We can't go to the FBI field office in Newark," Preston said, his eyes checking the rearview mirror constantly. "Archer will have contacts there. He'll claim the documents are forged and have us detained before we see an agent. We need a public venue, somewhere he can't silence us." "Omar," Samantha said. "Omar al-Hassan. He's at the St. Regis. If I give this to him, he pulls the funding. The deal collapses. Archer loses his shield." "The St. Regis is in Manhattan," Preston argued. "That's right back into the lion's den." "It's the only way," Samantha insisted. "Omar is the only one powerful enough to stand between me and Archer right now. He has diplomatic immunity." Preston grit his teeth and merged onto the highway entrance ramp. "Fine. But we're not taking the tunnel. They'll have license plate readers. We're taking the ferry. The ferry ride across the Hudson was a 15-minute eternity." Samantha stood by the railing, the wind whipping her hair, watching the Manhattan skyline grow closer. It looked less like a city and more like a fortress, with Archer Valerius sitting on the throne. Preston joined her, his face grim as he checked his burner phone. "I've contacted a friend at the New York Times," he said, over the roar of the engine. "If we don't make it to Omar, the story drops at noon. But without the physical proof, it's just allegations. We need to hand over that drive." Samantha glanced at a digital billboard on the dock ahead. The news ticker froze her blood. "Breaking news. Manhunt underway. Samantha Jenkins sought for corporate espionage. Suspect considered dangerous. They used her old employee ID photo, severe and unsmiling. Archer had flipped the script. He wasn't the criminal. He was the victim of a cyber attack. "He's fast," Preston muttered. "He's trying to make you radioactive so no one will listen." They disembarked, keeping their heads down. The city felt hostile now. Every siren made them flinch. "The St. Regis is 20 blocks, Preston said. "We can't walk it. Too many cameras." "Subway," Samantha decided. "We can get lost in the rush." They descended into the humid depths of the station, squeezing onto a crowded northbound train. Samantha held the metal pole, her knuckles white, surrounded by commuters oblivious to the war being fought right next to them. Suddenly, the train screeched to a halt between stations. The lights flickered and died, leaving them in a dim emergency glow. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are being held due to police activity ahead," the conductor's voice crackled. Preston grabbed her arm. "They know. Facial recognition at the turnstiles." "What do we do?" Samantha asked, panic rising. Preston looked at the emergency release lever. "We walk." He yanked the lever. The doors hissed open, and despite the protests of fellow passengers, they jumped down onto the tracks. The tunnel was dark, smelling of ozone and rats. They ran along the catwalk, away from the waiting police. "Emergency exit 300 yards up," Preston panted, using his phone as a flashlight. "Comes out in an alley near Fifth Avenue." They scrambled up a rusty ladder and shoved a heavy grate aside, emerging into a narrow alleyway behind a high-end department store. They were covered in soot, out of breath, and looked exactly like the desperate criminals the news claimed they were. 5 blocks to the hotel," Preston wheezed. They hit the street, but a police cruiser immediately turned the corner ahead. "In here!" Samantha pulled Preston into a crowded coffee shop. They moved to the back, near the restrooms, hiding behind a display of mugs. "We'll never make the lobby," Preston said, wiping grime from his glasses. "Aegis will be all over the entrance. The police are swarming the streets." Samantha clutched her backpack. She looked at the barista's iPad on the counter, then at her own laptop. An idea formed. "We don't need to get to Omar," she said. "We just need to get the data to him." The drive is encrypted, Preston argued, and the file is too big to email. I speak Arabic, Samantha said, booting up her computer. High dialect, the kind used in poetry, and coding ciphers. Omar's company uses a private cloud network called Al-Saka, the Falcon. If I can access the guest Wi-Fi, I can try to ping his server directly. You're going to hack a Saudi billionaire from a Starbucks? Preston asked, incredulously. No, I'm going to knock on the front door in a language only he understands. She connected to the Wi-Fi and found the portal for Omar's firm. Instead of logging in, she opened the contact support chat. She didn't type a complaint. She typed a line from an obscure pre-Islamic poem Omar had quoted at dinner. The wolf does not hunt the one who respects the silence of the desert. She hit send. 10 seconds passed. The screen flickered. A black window opened with green text. Identity verified. Protocol Falcon initiated. He's watching, Samantha breathed. She plugged in the hard drive. Uploading. 1%. 5%. The coffee shop door chimed. 2 men in grey suits entered. They scanned the room, their eyes locking onto Samantha and Preston instantly. Preston, Samantha warned. I see them. Preston stood up, blocking the view of the table. Keep uploading. I'll buy you time. Preston, no. I'm an ex-federal contractor, Samantha. They can't shoot me in a coffee shop. Preston walked toward the men, hands raised. Gentlemen, if you're looking for the line... One of the men shoved Preston aside with terrifying force. He crashed into a display case, shattering glass. Customers screamed. The second man lunged for Samantha. Upload. 60%. Samantha grabbed a pot of steaming coffee from a bussing cart and hurled it. The attacker roared, clutching his face. Samantha vaulted over the counter, scrambling into the kitchen. She huddled in the corner, watching the progress bar. 80%. The kitchen door kicked open. The second agent pulled a taser. Drop the computer, he yelled. 90%. I said drop it. He fired. The prongs hit Samantha in the shoulder. White-hot pain convulsed her body. She screamed, muscles locking, and fell sideways. The laptop clattered across the tile floor. The agent walked over, looking down at her twitching form. He raised his heavy boot and stomped on the laptop. Crunch. Plastic shattered. The screen went black. Target secured, the man said into his wrist mic. Device destroyed. We have the girl. Samantha lay on the dirty floor, darkness edging her vision. The upload had stopped. She had failed. Samantha woke to the sharp smell of ammonia and the dull throb of a headache. The last thing she remembered was the taser's crackle. Now she was zip-tied to a heavy leather chair in a room that smelled of cedar and absolute power. She blinked against the harsh light. She was back in the penthouse of Valerius Tower. You're awake, a flat voice said. Gale, the head of Archer's security, stood by the door. He pointed to the coffee table where the twisted, crushed remains of her laptop sat like a piece of modern art. Mr. Cole is in police custody, resisting arrest. And your drive? Forensically unrecoverable. The double doors opened, and Archer Valerius walked in. He looked immaculate, fresh from a shave, radiating the energy of a man who had just won a war. Samantha, he sighed, shaking his head. I offered you $5 million. You could be on a flight to Paris. Instead, you're here, a fugitive. He leaned against the mahogany desk, looming over her. The upload failed. My tech team cut the connection at 95%. The encryption key was never sent. The file is useless garbage. A cold stone of despair settled in Samantha's stomach. She had been so close. Here is how this ends, Archer said, his voice hardening. In 10 minutes, Omar Al-Hassan walks through those doors. He signs the Al-Fayed deal, my liquidity is restored, and I become untouchable. As for you, you will sign a confession admitting to extortion. You will plead guilty and disappear for 5 years." "I won't sign it," Samantha rasped. Archer smiled, a dead, shark-like expression. "You will. Because if you don't, I will sue your father's estate. I will drag Robert Jenkins's name through the mud so thoroughly that people will spit on his grave for a generation." Samantha struggled against the ties, tears of impotent rage stinging her eyes. "You monster!" "I'm a businessman," Archer corrected. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Valerius, the delegation has arrived." "Send them in," Archer commanded. "And leave her here. I want her to watch." The doors swung open. Omar al-Hassan entered, flanked by his legal team. He looked regal, his expression unreadable. He walked straight to the conference table, ignoring Samantha completely. "Archer," Omar said, his tone neutral. "Omar?" Archer beamed. "Welcome. I trust the contract revisions were satisfactory?" "They were illuminating." Omar sat down. Archer sat opposite him, sliding the heavy leather-bound contract across the marble. He uncapped a gold fountain pen and placed it on top. "Sign here, and we build the future." The room fell into a heavy silence. Samantha watched, her heart hammering against her ribs. It was over. Archer had won. Omar picked up the pen. He inspected the gold nib for a long moment. Then he set it down. "There is a proverb in my country," Omar said, his voice soft but carrying a weight that filled the room. "The tongue of the liar is cut by the truth of the silent." Archer frowned, his patience thinning. "I'm not in the mood for poetry, Omar. The wire transfer is pending." "You told me the waitress was a liar," Omar said. "You said she was unstable. You said she had no proof." "She is a liar," Archer scoffed, gesturing dismissively at Samantha. Her little blackmail attempt failed. "The evidence is destroyed." "Is it?" Omar asked. He reached into his suit pocket and placed his smartphone on the table. "It is true," Omar continued, his eyes sharpening into flint, "that the file upload stopped at 95%. My security team confirmed a corrupted data packet." Archer let out a breath, his shoulders relaxing. "Exactly. So let's." "However," Omar interrupted, "you made a mistake, Archer. You assumed that because Miss Jenkins is a waitress, she is simple. You forgot she is a linguist. She understands that sometimes the message is not in the file, it is in the metadata." Samantha lifted her head. "The metadata." "When Miss Jenkins initiated the connection," Omar explained, "she did not just send a file. She embedded a command line in the transmission header, a script that triggered an open audio bridge." Omar tapped his screen. A recording began to play. The audio was crystal clear. "Drop the computer. I said drop it." The sound of the taser crackled through the speaker. "Target secured. Device destroyed. We have the girl." It was Gail's voice. Then another voice cut in. Archer's voice, recorded just minutes ago in this very room. "The upload failed, Samantha. I will sue your father's estate. I offered you $5 million. Archer's face drained of color. He stared at the phone as if it were a ticking bomb. "You," Archer stammered, backing away. "You were listening." "Since she entered the room," Omar said. "I heard you admit to the bribery. I heard you admit to the fraud. And I heard you threaten a helpless woman." Omar stood up, towering over the table. "The Al-Fayed group does not do business with criminals. The deal is dead." "You can't do this!" Archer screamed, slamming his hands on the table. "I will sue you for breach of contract. This is entrapment." "Actually, it's probable cause," a voice said from the doorway. Archer whipped around. Preston Cole stood there, handcuffed but grinning, his lips split and bleeding. Beside him was a man in an FBI windbreaker, gun drawn. Behind him, a tactical team filled the hallway. "Federal agents!" the lead officer shouted. "Nobody move!" "Preston?" Samantha gasped. Preston winked. "I told you, Samantha. I called a friend at the DOJ. We didn't need the ledger to arrest him. We just needed a warrant to search this office. Omar's live stream gave us everything we needed." The agents swarmed the room. Gale was tackled before he could reach for his weapon. Archer stood frozen as the gold pen rolled off the table and hit the floor with a final, insignificant click. An agent knelt beside Samantha, cutting the zip ties. "Miss Jenkins, you're safe now." Rubbing her wrists, Samantha stood up. Her legs were shaky, but she forced them to hold. She walked past the chaos and stopped in front of Archer. He was being cuffed against the floor-to-ceiling window, his face pressed against the glass, overlooking his lost empire. He twisted his head to look at her, eyes wide with shock and hatred. "You're a waitress!" he spat. "You're nothing." Samantha leaned in close. "I am the daughter of Robert Jenkins," she said softly. "And you forgot the first rule of service, Archer. The customer is always right, until they refuse to pay the bill. Today, your bill came due." She turned to Omar. The billionaire bowed his head, a gesture of deep, peer-to-peer respect. "Shukran," Samantha said in Arabic. "Thank you." "Afwan," Omar replied with a faint smile. "You fought well, little wolf." 6 months later. The sign above the door was modest. The Jenkins Bistro. Located on a quiet Brooklyn street lined with brownstones, the air inside smelled of roasting coffee and fresh sourdough. Samantha wiped down the counter, humming to herself. The heavy weight of debt and fear was gone, replaced by the exhaustion of honest work. She wasn't wearing a stained apron anymore. She wore a chef's coat with her name embroidered on the chest. The bell above the door chimed. "We're not open for another 10 minutes, Samantha called out cheerfully without looking up. "I was hoping I could get a table before the rush," a familiar voice said. Samantha froze and looked up. Preston Cole stood there. He looked healthier. The dark circles under his eyes were gone, and he was wearing a suit that actually fit. "Preston!" Samantha laughed, coming around the counter to hug him. "I thought you were in D.C. "I was," Preston said, returning the hug. "The sentencing hearing wrapped up yesterday. The jury took 2 hours. Guilty on all counts: fraud, embezzlement, kidnapping. Archer is looking at 25 years, minimum." "And the investors?" Samantha asked, pouring him a coffee. "Omar's testimony nailed the coffin shut," Preston said, taking a sip. "By the way, he sends his regards, and he wants to know, again, if you're still interested in that consultant position for his linguistic division. The salary is triple what you make here." Samantha looked around her small restaurant. The sunlight streamed in through the clean windows, illuminating the framed photo of her father on the wall. He looked happy in the picture, caught mid-laugh. "Tell him I'm flattered," Samantha said, leaning against the counter. "But I think I'm done with that world. I like it here. The food is honest. The people say, 'Thank you,' and nobody is trying to hide $1 billion in the salad." Preston smiled, setting his cup down. "I figured you'd say that." "I'm exactly where I need to be," Samantha said. She was Samantha Jenkins. She had lost everything, fought back against a giant, and won. She wasn't a victim, and she wasn't just a waitress. She was the author of her own story now, and for the first time in years, the silence in her life wasn't empty. It was peaceful, and that is the story of how arrogance became the architect of its own destruction. Archer Valerius thought his money made him untouchable, and that Samantha's uniform made her invisible. He learned the hard way that the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one shouting. It's the one listening. Samantha proved that dignity isn't something you buy, it's something you are. If you enjoyed this story of justice, karma, and the power of standing up for yourself, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that even the underdog can take down a giant. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.